Good evening. This is the Wednesday, March 6, 2019 meeting of the Finance Committee. We're starting our meeting on time at 7 p.m. Our agenda tonight, we're going to review and vote on transfer requests. We've got a few of those left over from last week. We'll continue with an overview of the fiscal year 2020 budgets, review of budgets, and this is including CIP for our public safety departments, police, and fire rescue. We'll also have a discussion and a potential vote on debt management policy recommended by the CFO that will need to go back to the Board of Selectmen. Also, there'll be a discussion on the potential SAFER grant application, and we're going to take that as part of the fire department. I'll call that presentation and budget. No minutes tonight, excuse me, and then adjourn. So first, we're going to take care of these transfers in the order Sharon gave them to us. The first one, this is a transfer from the fire department, recent transfer. Let's see, amount requested $2,663.16. This is to cover a COLA and performance review increase for the deputy chief salary account. Present balance is in a deficit of just under $1,800. Chief Coleman is here. Chief, how are you? Good to see you tonight. I'll open this up to any questions first.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Okay. Our next transfers, these are, let's see, the next two are fire department related transfers. These we had discussed. I'd given a verbal okay on these back in January on, these were some, I'll call it, I guess, emergency or repairs and things that got opened up in the at the firehouse in terms of some upgrades that were going on. Let me, yeah, we'll take these one at a time. The first transfer, and this is something that I had verbally approved to the CFO, transfer of $5,000. This is from the overtime account to building maintenance account for unanticipated repairs to the building. And everyone, if they keep in mind, Ed, if I'm reading this correctly, there was an additional $5,000 requested from the reserve fund, which we will take second, but not at the moment. So, Chief, can you give us a brief explanation on how we came about with this needed repair, and if you could include it, I guess, to cover the additional $5,000 from the reserve that's also requested?
Sure. Good evening to the committee. As many of you remember, at town meeting we appropriated $9,700 to buy a turnout gear washing machine for the station. So during the installation of that project, when the plumber was going to hook the washing machine up to the drain and connect to the plumbing, he discovered basically the pipes behind the wall started coming apart in his hand. So he had to replace the drain, and then he had to open up a section of the wall in the laundry room behind and do some plumbing work. And then we had some electrical work that needed to be done as well. They had to run some new lines back from the panel back to the area of the turnout gear washer. The turnout gear washer project itself came in under budget $100. We spent $9,600 on that project. The unanticipated costs was when they were hooking up the drain, hooking up the plumbing, the pipes were not good. They were falling apart. The water was shut off to the building, so in order to get the water restored, we needed to complete the work to basically put the pipes back together.
So that, I'll call it that project. Obviously, it got a lot bigger, and let's call it Auburn Water, I guess, right? Is the need for the 10 grand in total transfers, correct, Chief?
Mr. Chairman, if you want, I'll give you a little perspective as to how we got here, because I think it's important to understand the building maintenance line as a whole and essentially how we got here. So in fiscal 19, the building maintenance budget is $25,000. On July 1, we encumber about $10,620 due to maintenance contracts, compressor maintenance, pest control, mass, all of those types of things. So right out of the gate, that relieves us essentially a remaining balance on July 1 of $14,380 for the remainder of the fiscal year. And that's for 2 fire stations. So essentially, if you were to divide that, you get about $7,000 per station. In the first month of fiscal 19, I sent an email to the CFO. We had spent $4,082 on unanticipated repairs to both stations. Within a week of each other, both water heaters went at Station 1 and Station 2. And we had a garage door spring let go at Station 2. So after we paid the $4,082, that left us a remaining balance of $10,298 for the remaining 11 months of the fiscal year. So now we're down to $5,000 per station for 11 months. On January 2nd, I provided the CFO with an update at the half-year mark and told him that we were 3/4 spent in the building maintenance line item, and our current balance at that time on January 2nd was $3,662 at the halfway mark. By January 11th, we were in the red on that account. So by the time, now, all of this work with the turnout gear washer was all going on within weeks of each other. So when the unanticipated electrical and plumbing issues came up, I was in the red on January 1st. So the $5,000, whether you want to consider it from the overtime or from the reserve, I guess it really doesn't matter. We needed about $5,000 to cover the unanticipated cost. And then the other $5,000 was basically just to put money in the account to get through the remainder of the fiscal year. That was the reason for the $10,000. The $10,000 was not to pay unanticipated bills. It was $5,000 to fix the unanticipated repairs, and then $5,000 to have something in the account. I just looked today, and as of right now, we have a remaining balance in that account of $584. So I still don't think that's going to get us to the end of the fiscal year. But it's just a little snapshot to realize that $25,000, especially on July 1, when we encumber, $10,000, it puts a dent in that 25 really right out of the gate. You'll see as we go through my budget tonight that we've taken some steps to address that. We've increased that line item by $7,000 to get us to where the 3-year average has been over the last couple of years. I guess just at the end of the day, it's not a sufficient amount of money currently, for the 2 stations, especially when you have electrical or plumbing issues. They're pricey. So that was the reason for the transfers, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'll open it up to questions. Kim?
Chief, back in January, we got a copy of a memo that you sent, or email that you sent to the CFO outlining what you needed the transfer for. And it was electrical work, $2,500. Carpet sticking to the subfloor in the fire prevention office, $1,570. Plumbing problems for the turnout gear wash installation. Women's locker room plumbing problems. Women's locker room electrical. Purchase of lockers for the women's locker room. Relocating ply movement motor at Station 2 so DPW can demo the performance stage. DPW materials for women's locker room, and then the broken garage door that you mentioned. Now, most of that stuff does not sound like it's related to the plumbing issues with the washing machine. It sounds like a renovation of the locker room that ran into more money than you expected.
No. So I'm using the women's locker room as the identification point because that's where they had to break the wall open in order to access the pipes. It's in the women's locker room. So there are some things on that list that I wound up scratching from the original transfer because after conversations with the CFO, I determined that some of those projects could wait. Those were projects that were in the chute that I was going to handle under the building maintenance line, providing I didn't have that unanticipated $5,000 repair. I'll give you the example. I forgot what the total was, whether it was $1,800 or $2,000, I forgot it was, to relocate the Plymouth vent motor. DPW was going to cut a section of the wall out of the stage at Station 2 so I could get a vehicle indoors before winter, because right now the shift commander's vehicle sits outside. So that was something I had planned on doing within the budget. Couldn't happen when we had the unanticipated repairs. The lockers was something that I was going to do as part of the budget. I now have 6 female employees. I didn't have enough lockers for all of the employees. So I was trying to take some of the things that I was going to do out of the normal budget and say, well, if I'm making a transfer, I may as well just make a transfer to do that. But on second look, I decided to hold off on those other things. With the exception, I think, of the lockers and the Plymouth thing, all of the other things that you mentioned are on my list that were related to the plumbing and electrical issues. If I'm missing one, please let me know. But
Okay.
and I want to be clear, there's no renovation project going on. I want to make sure that we're clear on that. We installed the turnout gear washer. We had plumbing and electrical issues. The only thing that was constructed, which was separate from this project, I spent $400 to erect a wall with a door on it in the women's locker room so the women could have some privacy in their locker room. That was $400. It's a half a dozen 2x4s and some sheetrock. I used the word renovation in my email. I shouldn't have, because it probably gave the impression that it was this grand project. It was a $400 wall.
Kim, anything else?
I don't really have a problem with the projects that need to be done. My problem comes with it coming to us after the fact, not before. Before you have a budget, you can't go over the budget by law. The only department that can go over budget is snow removal without an appropriation. Town meeting appropriates a set amount of money. It's not the finance committee that appropriates it, it's the town meeting. That we are all committed to those lines. So in order to get a transfer, it needs to come here first. And this isn't just for you, Steve. This is really an issue that happens with others as well. If it's a huge emergency, if I understand it, did you know about it ahead of time, Eddie?
So evident by, I think, the chief's comments tonight, he kept me in the loop, telling me that his account was dwindling. We know that, and I appreciate that. That helps me in determining at what point we have to bring a transfer before you when the account balance gets down to a level that we both don't feel comfortable with. I think what happened, I think there was a comfort level, but I think when they got into this situation with the turnout gear washer, I view that as an emergency. Not an emergency to the extent where you're allowed to deficit spend. I think that's when the call was made to the chair saying, we have a problem, I need a verbal transfer in order to encumber some monies, tie up some monies that are going to meet his expenses to get the job done. Now, that being said, we've had these discussions before. I have no issue in calling a meeting on short notice. I think I convey that through the chair. I think he talks to you, the members, to see what you want to do to meet I have no problem meeting. I know the chief will have no problem meeting. I think that's a discussion that we need to have going forward. How do we want to handle these situations? Because they are going to arise from time to time. Budgets are tight, especially as we get closer to the end of the year. These things do happen. There are things that happen that are unexpected, unforeseen, and we need to be prepared for that, and we need to address it as they arise.
Yep.
I think the biggest concern over it, I think, was the way the email was worded, when it sounded like there was a women's locker room project that was trying to get squeaked in under the radar and maybe went over a little bit. I think that was the concern, because it was like, well, that doesn't seem to be an emergency nature. You know, the email reflected more that the pipes basically crumbled in the plumber's hands, and we just spent $9,700, $9,600 on new turnout gear washers, then I don't think anybody would have even really blinked an eye at it. It just seemed like, you know, we were trying to squeak under the radar, and I'm glad that's not the case.
That is not the case.
Okay.
And I would certainly invite any of you to come down and take a look at what was done. And again, where they had to break through the concrete wall was in the women's locker room, so I was using that as geography. There was no renovation project of the women's locker room. They had to bust through the wall in order to fix the pipes.
And nobody's questioning anybody's integrity as to, or
Sure.
it's just a matter of the way it was phrased and the nature in which we got it. And the amount, obviously the amount is, you know, a larger amount for last minute transfers, usually the smaller, and the concern there. But I guess my question is to the CFO is, why do our department heads, why are they responsible for their building maintenance accounts? It almost seems like, for the size of the amount of buildings we have in our inventory, that should be something that should be centralized, whether it's through DPW. We've got now this facilities section that's doing lots of work for different town funds. You know, for the fire department to be contracting a plumber, you know, is there another project that the police department could have shared that same plumber in that same time frame? It just seems like they should focus on their public safety mission, and not so much, because we hear it in the budget saying, okay, you know, the police department's got, you know, an aging AC units that keep failing on them, and it's not their professional status. Now, they do a good job at it. You know, it's a trial by fire. You learn about heating and air conditioning and electrical, just, you know, but it almost seems like that should be removed from them, and that should be a line, or larger line. I think the only natural place would be in the DPW's budget, and let them say, okay, we've got this pool of money to maintain our buildings in town, and this is how we're going to allot it and manage it and plan it and going forward.
I think part of the problem, it's a good question, we've had these discussions about, in the future, maybe having an in-house electrician and in-house plumber, because certainly there's enough work to keep those individuals busy. We currently don't have that, and that's a consideration for a expanded facilities maintenance department. But I can tell you, in some departments, we have to attribute those costs to those departments, because there's a minimum level of appropriation that certain departments have to meet. For instance, the library, in order for them to qualify for a level of state aid, they have to meet a level of contribution. So to remove those costs from the library and put them elsewhere, we're not able to properly reflect what the true costs of operations are at the library, as well as on the facility side as well. So from a cost accounting point of view, we have to charge some of those costs to some of our departments. And when you treating some departments one way and other departments another way, it gets muddied. It would be nice to remove all those costs and put them under one roof. We're not able to do it that time, because number one, we don't have the personnel to address these issues. All of these services are outsourced right now, with the exception of utilization of an electrician that the school department has, but he's not always available. So it becomes difficult to rely on an individual that the school department may have when they may be assigned to something else. Those are discussions, quite honestly, as a result of what happened here. We're having discussions on how to address those future emergencies and future needs.
It seems that Mr. Fahey, the school department has Mr. Fahey to manage their facilities and projects and oversee contractors, and it almost seems that a facility manager on the other side of the house is warranted to manage such things. And whether accounting-wise you need to leave the line items in those departments, at least to manage, excuse me, the projects, the installation of the new turnout gears, the garage door companies, all those things, it just seems that that's better suited elsewhere. That's just, not a dollars and cents.
I couldn't agree with you more. Need someone to manage all of that on the town side.
And the historical lens of it too, because they can look back, whether there's changes in leadership and stuff. You've got that person that knows the history of that building and what we've done to get to this point, and they can speak to those things.
That's good. Any other questions? Yeah?
Question, so the money has been encumbered up front, and you spent this $10,000, so do you say you only have $500 to get you through to the end of the year?
Correct. My current building maintenance line item has $584 in it.
So should there be money put in there so you can get through till June 30th without him having to come again?
Yes, I think that's something that we're going to have to address. I wasn't aware that the balance was at that level, because we did put an additional 5 in there to anticipate some other costs that may come up from time to time to get them through the end of the year. So that's a discussion I will have with the chief after tonight, and we'll be back at some point with a transfer to provide some additional funds.
Okay. My only comment on this, and Chief, actually, you took the words out of my mouth, the renovation word versus repair or some other word, that's what kind of misled me on what the hell is going on here on this. And I think everyone was taking a step back on that without knowing exactly what was going on. Obviously, going through a concrete wall, whether it's through the woman's locker room or anywhere, that's a pretty big undertaking. I guess Monday morning quarterback right here saying anytime we're touching pipes in the town of Auburn, we're crossing our fingers and toes and hoping that there isn't a pile of rot on the other side of this, and that's just what we all deal with. So just a comment and ad-libbing on that. Any other comments on this? We have a motion. I'll accept a motion on this. $5,000 going to the building maintenance account.
So moved.
Do we have a second? All right. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have one opposed. Thank you. So the second transfer would be the reserve account transfer. This was adding $5,000 to the building maintenance account. Request for funding to meet repair and expense obligations until June 30th, 2019. While we're here, Ed, can we amend this amount now? Because where else is this money going to come from?
So I just had a brief discussion with the chief. So as we're looking at his budget, we believe that the overtime account will have a surplus at year end, given year-to-date actuals. The amount of reimbursement we're getting for IOD, an IOD situation has been, what, $35,000 year-to-date? That being said, and that is a position that does not have, that's not a group position, so it doesn't have to be backfilled. As a result of that, if it was a group position, we wouldn't be having this discussion. That being said, the chief believes that there will be a surplus. We can address either probably next week a transfer to put some money into the building maintenance account, with the possibility as well, I just want the finance committee to know, we may be able to replenish the reserve account for the initial 5 that we took out as well.
Okay. Will that be in the form of a transfer?
Yes.
I like those transfers. All right. So anyways, the reserve account request is $5,000 to the building maintenance account. Once again, I gave a verbal okay on this as part of backfilling that account. Any comments or questions on this? Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? One opposed. Thanks, Chief. Thanks for explaining that for us.
You're welcome.
What I'd like to do, if possible, because I'd like to move up the SAFER grant application now because of its budget implications, not really just for this year coming up, but after that. So if we can have a brief discussion on that, Chief. I commented last week that I did catch your presentation to the Board of Selectmen 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was a great presentation on that. So if you could maybe give us a bit of a Reader's Digest version and how that sort of rolls into the current budget which we're about to look at.
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So as you are all aware, since 2013, I have been requesting that our minimum shift staffing be moved from 6 to 7, which would require an additional full-time member per group. This fiscal year, in fiscal 19, the town took steps and added 2 full-time positions to the department with a half-year start date, so those members came on board this past January 1. So currently, we have 2 groups that are at 9 and 2 groups that are at 8. In the budget that you have before you this evening, there is another half-year position with a January 1 start date. So on January 1, providing that this budget is approved at town meeting, come January 1, we would just be short the 1 position to get all groups to 9. So I appeared before the Board of Selectmen a couple of weeks ago. I apologize, I was not able to make it last week, but I know the deputy was here, and I believe the chairman just passed around the handout that went around. So I'm asking, I'll be before the board for a formal vote on Monday, asking the board to consider again allowing me to apply for the federal SAFER grant, which if we received it, the federal government would pay 75% of the salary for the first year, 50% for the second, 25% for the third year. And why I'm interested in going for the 2 positions is even though we have that half-year position built into this budget, the timing of this is we would anticipate an award before January 1st. So if we were successful in getting 2 positions, essentially we could get some relief on the position really that we're already hopefully going to have in January. We could get some assistance over that 3-year period.
Okay. Once again, I heard the presentation. It made a lot of sense to me, and I guess much more reasonable than the several people that were part of last year's application. I think it was 6.
Yeah, well, so last year, not to
muddy it up.
Yeah, but I had requested 8 because there was no consideration for the 4, which we're moving towards now. And even if we didn't accept the 8, I was interested in the board allowing me to approve 8 because I wanted to see where we ranked nationally and get some feedback on that application. So that's why I had requested the 8 positions.
Okay. So the budget, which we're going to get to, is including only an addition of 1/2 position or a position in January, halfway through the year.
It's a full-time position
Starting in January. No other ads in addition to that as of July 1st. Okay, just so we're clear on that. I'll open that up to questions. Anyone? Okay. So I believe the Board of Selectmen was looking for some direction from us on whether we were in favor of the fire department to go ahead with the application, which we might not get it, right?
That's correct.
In fact, I believe you said we may only get 1. There's a chance of that, too.
They do have the possibility to amend the grant, but this is a competitive grant nationwide.
And this does include benefits at a certain percentage, which those of us that were here last week discussed too. So it covers some additional costs related to adding staff. I guess I'll ask for, Kim, question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chief, what's your group staffing now?
So the group staffing...
Is it 7 or 9?
No, our group staffing, let's go back just 1 year. Our group staffing since 2006 has been 8 members per group. Okay. This past January, there were 2 positions added, so I have 2 groups at 9 and 2 groups at 8.
Is that the number of firefighters, or is that like the lieutenant?
That includes the captain and the
Okay.
lieutenant. That's total complement.
So,
So on the groups of 8, when I have a group of 8, the minimum is 6, so we allow 2 off at a time, so our minimum shift staffing is 6.
you allow 2 off?
Like if somebody requested a vacation day, we would allow 2 people to be off at a time.
Is that standard? Because I know if the police department where I worked for 20 years, 20+ years, the divisions had the ability to give up to 10% of their staff in a shift. So if they had 8, they could effectively give 1 person a day off.
So
So yours is more like a 20% or more than 20, because you have to deal with whole people.
yeah, and the other side of it is, especially as we get an aging workforce that climbs in vacation time and paid time off, if we were to only allow 1 person off, when we map it out over the course of the year with their schedule, they actually wouldn't have enough time in order to be able to use all of their paid time off. So that's why 2 is sort of the threshold. And we use 6 as the minimum because that's the minimum. In order to operate 2 ambulances and at least 1 2-person engine company, it's 6. I'm not really comfortable dipping below 6 because now that's just going to skyrocket the overtime. But by getting all the groups to 9, which would allow us to set our minimum at 7, still allowing the same 2 off, it gives us a little more flexibility to staff the 2 ambulances and then a 3-person engine. And then providing we're at full staff, we would able to keep the West Street engine up with more consistency, which we do not now. There's only 3 people assigned to the West Street station. So when the ambulance goes out of the West Street station, the engine's essentially shut down. And we run a minimum of 2 out of the West Street station. So on the days when there's only 2 there, it's a one or the other situation. It's either the ambulance that goes out or the engine that goes out. So it would give us a little more flexibility.
Yep.
I know that you're now on a 24-hour schedule for your firefighters, right? They work.
The firefighters have worked a 24-hour schedule since 2003.
2003. I thought that was something they did in the last contract.
No, they went from a 48-hour work week to a 42-hour work week, but they were still working 24-hour shifts. They've had 24-hour shifts since 2003.
How does that work in, as opposed to 8-hour shifts? It would seem to me logically that if you have 10 people working 24-hour shifts, you require more people to cover than 8-hour shifts.
No, not really, because if you had 8 people work, if you needed 8 people on a 24-hour period and you wanted to maintain a shift, well, let's just say 7. If we wanted to maintain a shift staffing of 7 for a 24-hour period, if we were doing that over the course of 3 different shifts, we would need 21 people in order to cover those shifts. So we're covering a full 24-hour period with 7 people, whereas if we did a 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7, trying to maintain a shift staffing of 7, you would need 21 people in order to work one 24-hour shift.
That's what I meant. Have your guys always worked not 8 or 10-hour shifts, but 24-hour shifts?
The 24-hour shifts went into effect in 2003.
Oh, okay.
Prior to 2003, when the fire station was not a round-the-clock operation, there was a day shift, a second shift, when there was 12 full-time people. But in 2003, when the fire department went around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they went to 24-hour shifts.
And the last contract, what was it? Why am I confused?
The last contract, what was changed was the work week, their schedule. They went from a 48-hour work week to a 42-hour work week. So their schedule before they would work a day on, a day off, a day on, 2 days off, a day on. So their schedule was sort of all over the place. The new schedule allows them to work a day on, 2 days off, 4 days off, a day on, 2 off, a day on, 4 off, consistently. So it's a much better schedule for the firefighters. They're essentially working the same amount of days, per month, but in the old schedule, they were working either a Saturday or a Sunday 3 weeks out of the month, so they never had a full weekend. So they were working, it was a very, and they were the only department really I believe in the state that was working that schedule. It was a very tough schedule. It was a brutal schedule. So what was negotiated was their work week. They've been working 24s for 13 years, longer, 16 years. Yep.
Any other questions? Just to add a comment, I know when, Chief, you gave a couple of page report along with your budget, and you were actually talking eventually getting to 10 net 8 in terms of your staffing on that. It's just to kind of underscore, you're still looking at 2, differential of 2, whether you go 9 or 10 per shift.
I will just say this, because it's a conversation, a longer conversation for another day, but I will just say this, that we've had the same minimum shift staffing of 6 since 2001 for 18 years, and we've been running the same number of people on a shift since 2006. What I addressed in my letter and what I've talked about, it seems like ad nauseum with town administration, is I just want to, within the next 5 years, have more conversation and pay closer attention to what our call volume is doing, what is the activity of the department, because I don't want to go another 18 years to increase the minimum by 1. I can sit here tonight and tell you that the department is understaffed for the current activity that we're running. And I mentioned this at the Board of Selectmen the other day. The need is greater than 9. The need is greater than 10, but I do recognize and understand that it is going to take some time to get there. I want it to be a data-driven discussion. I don't want it to just say, this is what we need, but we're a data-driven organization, and I think that's easy to prove. But I just want to make sure that over the next several years that we're paying attention to the activity of the department, and we at least have a plan in place. That's really all that I'm asking, is that we just have a plan to address the staffing that fluctuates with our call volume, so we don't go another 18 years trying to reset the minimum.
Fair comment.
Question.
Mallory?
With the new Reliant being built, do you anticipate any increase in call volume for patients there? I know sometimes with medical facilities, right, there are emergencies, and I feel like I see the ambulances a lot going to some of the other facilities we have in town.
The short answer is yes. I do anticipate an increase, but this is something that I've talked with town administration. I really don't know how to wrap my arms around this particular, around this facility yet. I can tell you that the first week that they opened, we were there at least twice a day, every day for the first week that they opened. What they did was they closed 4 separate Reliants and moved them all into 1. Now, there are some more specialties, and there's a lot going on within that particular building. Even though Reliant by law is allowed to have a private ambulance company, which, thank God, because we would not be able to support the volume that they're doing out of there. So even though that they're allowed to contract with a private ambulance company and call them for certain types of emergencies and have them respond in there, and that's fine. But the law does state that depending on the type of emergency and it's critical in nature, that private ambulance company, even if they're notified, they do have to notify the local 911 provider because we're quicker. So there's 350 people in that building on a daily basis, and that's just staff. So it is a large facility. The short answer is yes, I do anticipate an impact, but I think it's too early to make any projections on what that's really going to do for us. But we have been there, and we've been there often, but it's early to tell.
Good question. Kevin?
I know we're a little bit out of order, we're on the safer stuff, we haven't really got to the meat of the budget, but I know the reasons why we're moving away from call firefighters and moving towards career firefighters. That I completely understand. But on the medical side, on the paramedic side, have we looked at any per diem paramedics? I mean, you're always going to run at least one ambulance, as opposed to when you've got groups, if you've got guys that are firefighter paramedics that you know you've got a shift that's coming up that's short, that you could leave the firefighter side heavy and get a guy, for instance, from Worcester EMS who's, got some high skill set. Wouldn't that be a little bit of a cost savings and accomplish both tasks?
It's something that would have to be, obviously negotiated with the union. There are departments out there, I want to be cautious of how I say this, there are some departments out there that use a model that you're talking about, some more successful than others. It comes with its challenges. I will say it's not something that we've looked at. It would obviously have to be a conversation with the union. I'm not sure that there's a ton of benefits to it, other than just sort of the obvious. You could leave the fire side heavy, but there are some other operational concerns that I would have with it. But to be honest with you, it's not something that I've looked at.
And I wouldn't say on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking, somebody wants to use a vacation day and it's going to cause them to go below. Well, if we can fill it with out of the per diem pool and then grant your day, is that something? But running a dual service fire and EMS, it's in some realities it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, because our members are dual trained, so running the ambulance allows us to really beef up the suppression side to have those forces available, but on the same side the ambulance sort of strips them away. But to have, to backfill with per diems that necessarily wouldn't be trained on the fire side, now we're losing on the suppression side, because if we had a couple per diems running the ambulance, well now we're not really running a 6-person shift, we're running a 4-person shift on the fire side. So it has operational challenges, but not something that I've looked at.
All right. Any other questions, Ian? Anything? Okay, so Kim, sure.
Eddie, is the town administration recommending this grant?
Yes, we support the filing of this grant.
Okay. Any other questions? So I guess I'll accept a motion either way, whether we support pursuing this grant or not. Do we have a motion?
Motion to support the grant.
Okay. Do we have a second? And a second? Multiple seconds. I'm not sure what that means. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. I hope you get it.
Thank you very much.
That would be great.
Thank you to the committee.
That'd be great. Okay, let's move quickly into the budget, starting with the CIP for fire.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to send around there was a correction on the line item description. It didn't change the values of any line items nor the bottom line. I just wanted to give you...
Summary of the fire department at the fire department? Or
just the fire department.
just fire department, okay.
Third line down, we had to make a change in the line item description. It was a vehicle. It referenced the wrong vehicle.
Which line item was that at, or?
Third one down, replace support vehicle, Ford Explorer 5-year LP.
Yes. So that was the replace shift commander?
Yes.
All right, that's fine.
So the shift commander vehicle is the vehicle that the supervisor drives. That's the second from the bottom, so it was listed twice. So the support vehicle is vehicle for training, audit and inspections, kind of the runaround vehicle.
Okay, regarding the CIP, the way that I look at this, and maybe it's not even the best way to look at it, is current year, if there are any, I'll call it last second shifts, in the 2020 budget and what's coming up new in the 2024 budget. The chief and all departments do provide background for all of these additions and changes that are going on. I guess the only thing I see with the current year is the forestry vehicle was, we got the pricing down, right? That estimate was just off a little bit.
Correct, the price
Yeah,
was...
okay.
yeah.
And that was something, I think, it looks like we initially thought that was going to be 15 grand a year over 4. So that's fine. The two other items that I noticed, and this is either to you or Ed, regarding the building improvements for fiscal year 2023, can we effectively call that a placeholder? Obviously, there's no backup behind it. I get it, what we're trying to see what might happen.
Yeah, so internally, within the department, we do have a list. So yes, I think a placeholder is a good name for that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have some projects identified, but we're also not prepared to pull the trigger on any of those projects until the building study that we have going on is complete.
Okay. And once again, that was the one thing there was no backup for, so that made me think that. The other is, and maybe against my better judgment, replace the fire tower.
So again, Mr. Chairman...
And this is the second year, so I apologize. I might have asked last year, so I'm asking again on that and where that stands.
So it's slated to be replaced in 2023, but again, it's a project that we're holding off on, waiting for the building study to come back.
Okay.
Because within the programming and the design features that we've expressed to the architect, we're trying to incorporate some of these features into the apparatus bay of the station. And if that were to occur, then I would be removing the fire training tower from the CIP completely.
Okay, that's fine. My other question to that, and maybe it's a reminder, obviously other towns use it. We use it also in conjunction, some joint training, that kind of thing. Do we get any kind of fee from other fire departments for
We
that?
do. The municipalities that use the facility
I thought we did.
pay us an annual fee, and that's how we maintain the facility. So no tax dollars go to the maintenance of the fire training tower. I don't know if I have it. I don't know if I have a fresh copy, but
No, that's fine.
all
fees-
of the money that sits currently in the fire. I currently have $19,924 in the training tower account, and all of that money comes from other municipalities using the facility.
So it doesn't go to general fund?
Yeah, it goes to a special revenue account,
For that, okay.
restricted for that purpose.
This is kind of a reminder. I thought that was the case, but I thought this was a good time to put a reminder out there. And the only big new addition, I guess, would be Engine 3, which I saw this morning, and once again, you guys did a great job at my mother's house. Thank you. But
Thank you.
I
Hope she's
noticed
doing
it was Engine 3 showed up, so, yeah, thanks.
Yes, that would be in 2024 would be the replacement of Engine 3. So in the capital for 20 is the replacement of Engine 1. So Engine 1 is currently the West Street engine. When the new engine comes in, that will be assigned to headquarters as Engine 4. Engine 3, which is currently at headquarters, will move out to West Street. And then the current Engine 1 will move into the spare status, and then Rescue 2 will go out of service. So everything takes a jump.
Okay. All right, that was me asking questions first. Trevor, question?
The building improvement line, is that 50,000 changed prior year to current year on the expectation? And then also, while these plumbers and electricians have been doing some of the maintenance work, the unexpected maintenance work, has there been anything highlighted to us that would indicate there's more plumbing and electrical that would be needed? I know there's some building assessments going on, so long-term, we're debating whether or not we're going to be doing work to the building, but, in the event.
I think I understand your question. I currently have no project slated at either stations. The $50,000 that you're seeing here in FY23 is $50,000 of building improvements at both stations, whatever those may be. I can tell you headquarters needs a new roof. So that would be part of this 50,000. But again, we're holding off on really all of those sort of larger projects until.
Yeah, I guess my question is, have they identified, while the plumber's in there and he's, these pipes are falling apart on him, are they saying, hey, we're going to need, if you were to stay here, if long-term we were to, take the bones of that building and stay in that place, and I don't know what the, the plan is. Obviously, I'm sure there are several,
Well,
but I guess would that go up a couple?
The study that we have going on now is going to make those types of recommendations as to what to do. I mean, I could tell you that if we were going to stay there long term, or I could certainly tell you that if I was planning any project moving forward, that there would be some contingent. Every time we open a wall, yep. I'll give you an example. When we did the fire prevention office renovation that was budgeted, DPW opened the wall, and there were extension cords in the wall running the power that we were not aware of. So that was part of the electrical work that had to be done out at the West Street station. Who would expect that you're going to open a wall and find orange extension cords running as your power source?
Well, they were orange ones, so.
They were orange. They were good.
Safety.
They were good ones. But those are the types of, those are the types of problems.
I guess I just want to make sure that as they're, we have these unexpected things coming up that if they're noting any, like long-term, that we're booking it in here, even if we don't have anything slated because we might not be there, that we're at least have it in the contingency plan so that if 2023 rolls around and we're still there, then we, it was on the docket.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I can say that although we've made some strides, especially at headquarters, we really haven't touched much at West Street because it's a sort of a ball in its own. But one of the items that, fortunately, we had a plumber, I think, that felt bad for us during all of these things, but I called Ed on a Saturday. We had a pipe break out at Station 2 on a Saturday that flooded the station. And that was about an $1,100 repair that I think he felt so bad for us. He came out and he did the repair, and he didn't invoice us for it. So plumbing and electrical is an issue at both buildings.
Yeah.
Trevor, what I can tell you is, in order for us to deal with this on a day-to-day basis, we addressed it in the FY 2020 budget and actually bumped it up by about $7,000. Yeah. So we do recognize the need. We know it's going to flare up from time to time. But looking at the big picture, I understand what you're saying. The infrastructure of the building, what type of condition is that in? I think that assessment is going to be made through this study, and a recommendation one way or another will be made when that's completed.
Ed, the timing on that study is the fall of this year?
We anticipate to have a report back by the summer, and I think it was town administration's hope to be able to do a presentation for town meeting in October.
So if for whatever reason we're keeping the existing building, I'm sure there's some, crazy things in there that we would be adding to the CIP if there was a need to be addressed over the next couple of years. That 50 grand will probably increase and move closer to 21, 22, I'm sure, if we stay in that building and keep the other.
I don't even want to speculate as to what recommendation or what that cost may be. I think we examine that and determine what would be in the best interest of the town based upon options that they may be giving us, but I have no way of knowing what to expect out of that study.
But we could interject it into a future capital plan, and whatever year is necessary to do that. That's what we've done before. Kevin?
You mentioned that there's a retained revenue account specifically for the fire tower, and I probably should have had Lieutenant Harrigan go first, because I think yours is the most complicated budget that we see, because there are multiple revenue sources in there between ambulance receipts and I feel like after reviewing your budget, I never truly get a clear picture as to where the money goes and what accounts. I mean, again, I think yourself and the CFO have and the deputy probably have a perfect idea as to where these funds are, but it kind of, when you hear there's $19,000 in an account to maintain the tower, yet we're pulling out of other revenue sources to do maintenance on other fire-related, things that, I don't know, it just, I guess I don't get a clear picture as to some of the revenue sources you have within your budget. For instance, that $19,000, depending on how it's worded and how it was originally put together and, described as an account, seems like it should have been something that could have been used for other maintenance issues as needed. So it's just you have a very complicated budget.
Yeah, I guess I'll say this. I have 19,000 in there right now. That's not always the case. I could spend that tomorrow just replacing the tiles in the burn room, which have been done twice in its 20-year history. It's $25,000 to replace all of the tiles in that burn room. So I hear what you're saying, but it's sort of a rob Peter to pay Paul type situation, because if I was pulling out of the training tower account to offset other areas of the budget, then on that 10-year cycle, when it came time to replace the tiles in the burn room to make that room functional, either that money wouldn't be there, or I'd be looking at the operational side of the budget to try to do that. So 100% of the money that's in that account is from other communities. So I think that's another reason that we really kind of need to be cautious about using that for our own operational side, because those communities are paying that in support and use of that training tower, and 100% of that money is spent on maintenance and upkeep of the training tower. So although $19,000 sounds like a lot of money, I did some drainage work one time, that was $10,000 worth of drainage work, in the pilot. So it goes fast. It takes some time to build up, but one project and I'm back down to $1,000 in that account. Yeah.
In the general fund, just I want to make this clear, is not subsidizing any portion of that training tower. That money that's set aside, that $19,000, whatever that balance is strictly used for the training tower and nothing else. So there's really no need to show an offset here in the budget, because there's no expense on the operational side of the budget that requires an outside revenue source to offset it.
Is it like a revolving account?
It's not. It's a special revenue account, and it was established as a result of this agreement that allows other towns to use it with an annual contribution to specifically go to the maintenance of that fire tower.
Yep.
Chief, can you tell me how many non-fire ambulance vehicles you have?
I wanted to, let me think about that for a second. Non-fire?
Non-fire truck or ambulance,
Okay, so chief, deputy chief, 2 fire inspector cars.
How many people are in fire prevention?
2. And then we have 1 support vehicle.
And what's the shift?
Actually, I'm sorry. And then the shift commander's vehicle is a Tahoe.
Is a what?
Chevy Tahoe.
Okay, so you have 6.
Yep. Do you want to include like the pickup truck with the plow?
That doesn't respond, but doesn't respond.
Well, it does. Like if we have hazmat incidents where we request extra speedy dry, booms, pads, that all gets loaded in the pickup truck. So it does respond to emergencies, not on a daily basis. It's a support vehicle.
So you have 7 what you'd call support vehicles.
That sounds high. Let me run through them again. The chief deputy, then there's 2 fire inspector vehicles, and the pickup truck. That's 5.
And the shift support.
And the shift commander's vehicle, but that's on the road as an emergency vehicle every day.
And the support.
I don't have a support vehicle right now. It's our support vehicle, when we got the 2nd fire inspector, went to fire prevention. So I currently have no support vehicle.
That's what's in this.
Right, but that's to put a support vehicle in. Like right now, I have a member going to the fire academy. She's taking the fire inspector vehicle only because I have a fire inspector that's IOD. If both the fire inspectors were working, I would not have a vehicle for her to take to the fire academy. I'd be paying her mileage. So we have 5 vehicles that are not fire trucks or ambulances. 6 if you include the shift commander's vehicle, but I wouldn't include that because that's an emergency vehicle that responds on emergencies every day.
Is that a, like a
That's the,
SUV or?
yes, one of the shift officers rides in that vehicle on a daily basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on the fire department CIP? Okay, then let's move to the operating budget. Okay. So I'm just going to go through these subtotals quickly. There's obviously a few changes in the total, and then we'll open it up, questions as we go on this. So for the chief subtotal is 265,712, which is about $4,500 increase over prior year. It does agree with the town manager's recommendation. The fire admin total, this is inclusive of the chief, is $351,462, which is 10 grand more than 2019 appropriation. Most of that building maintenance supplies, as discussed. Let's see, the subtotal for the firefighters line, or lines, $2,679,714. This is down from the department request, and I think the chief had kind of filled us in on that, but an increase of $78,000 from 2019, $93,000 of which is under career firefighters. That's from 2019. And equipment and supplies, et cetera, that's $148,150, which is down slightly from the chief's request, but up 9 grand from prior year. A total budget, this is a fire total of $3,179,326, which is a 3.13% increase over fiscal 19, if I'm reading that correctly. The chief's initial request was a 6% increase. I'll open that up to questions on it. Kim?
Eddie, how much has been expended year-to-date in the overtime?
Original budget, $225,000. You transferred $5,000 out through a verbal, and you ratified that tonight for a net of $220. Spent $71,236, leaving a balance, and this is as of today, $148,764. Now, the expended is offset by the amount of IOD. We really expended $35,000 more than the 71. So it would put you at about a 105 if that IOD reimbursement didn't come in from the insurance carrier, the Hartford. But we're running 32.4% expended year-to-date with a balance of $148,000. So given this rate, and certainly it does pick up in the second half of the year because people tend to take vacation time in May and June, but we feel confident at this time that there would be a surplus in that account at year end. I can't tell you what that's going to be, but certainly we anticipate a surplus.
Because looking at the 3-year average, and if you're increasing your staffing, you should reduce your overtime expenses. Correct?
No, and I'll explain that. So we're still looking to cover the same amount of overtime hours. If we have 8 people on a group and we're allowing 2 off for a minimum of 6, and we add staff to go to a group of 9 with a minimum of 7, we're still only allowing the same 2 people off. So the same number of overtime hours are being covered. So the increase in staffing does not translate to a reduction in overtime.
Because you're filling, if you have 9 on your shift and 2 are off, you're filling those 2 shifts by overtime?
No. If someone requests a day off and we let them off and that's going to leave a shift of 7, there's no overtime. If we allow a second person off and it's a shift of 6, no overtime. The only thing that would trigger overtime at that point is if we had an IOD or somebody was sick, family emergency. So if we were going to drop below 6, then we would fill to 6. IOD drives the overtime. Last fiscal year, when I was here for one of my transfers, I don't know if it was in March or May, at one point in last fiscal year, I had 11 members out. Not all IOD. I think only 3 or 4 of them were IOD. The rest of them either had some surgeries or, they were out. But at one point, I had 11 people out. It was a tremendous amount of overtime. I think, our total transfers into overtime last year, I want to say it was like $50,000. So this year, when you look at the overtime, it's a bit of an anomaly for 2 reasons. I hope this is wood, because we've had a very good year in terms of injuries. I think I've only had 1 member out IOD this fiscal year, and it was for a short period of time. And Captain Anderson being out for the entire fiscal year, still receiving insurance payments but not backfilling him, is overinflating that overtime account. So that's why we've collected, I think, around $40,000 in insurance payments from the Hartford. So if you were to deduct that money that we got from the Hartford and we were just looking at regular overtime, like Ms. Kazanovich said, the overtime would probably be around the 105 mark, where if you ran that out for the next 16 weeks, that leaves us about $6,500 a week in overtime. Now, I'm not spending that now, but come May, June, it'll be in that $5,000 to $6,000 mark. So we do anticipate a little bit of surplus, but if you want to look at overtime, I mean, it's good, because I'm not, for once in my life, I'm not losing sleep about overtime, but this year is a bit of an anomaly because of the amount of IODs that we've had, which has been very minimal, and the additional payments that we're getting on a position that we're not backfilling.
Seeing you brought up Captain Anderson, is he one of the 2 that you say are in fire prevention?
Yes.
So, did you tell us last year that he had intentions to retire in the next year?
He was supposed to retire this summer, but unfortunately, he's having additional medical procedures from this injury, so his retirement won't be known until there's a reconciliation to this injury.
Right, so, but you don't anticipate him coming back to work?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. If he heals, I don't know. I'll say this, this is not how he wanted to go out.
Right.
So if he heals to a point where he can come back, I'm not sure whether he'll want to come back to the department, at least for a short period of time, and sort of have an exit that way. So I don't know. If he can come back, I would anticipate him maybe to come back for a short period of time, just so he can sort of go out on his terms, if you will.
Right. And then would you fill that position in fire prevention, or would you put it somewhere else?
No, so I had advocated to get those 2 positions. Unfortunately, I fought to get that second inspector back, and to date, we haven't worked a day with 2 inspectors in there. But when Captain Anderson retires, Captain Moran will be in charge of the division, and then I will be backfilling Captain Anderson's spot with a fire inspector who will serve as the second person in that office.
Anything else?
Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, so the only reason I was asking about overtime is because looking at the 3-year average here, it's 180,000, and that factors in the 238,000 that you expended last year when you had all those 11 out. Do we need 225,000 there?
So the 238 that was spent in fiscal 18 was due to the IODs and
Right.
all of that.
That was like an anomaly.
So the other reason, for the increase is that even though the same number of overtime hours exist, right now, when you look at the staff, I don't know that it's quite half, but I have quite a few people that are climbing the step system, so I have a handful of people that are at lower steps. But as the years go on and they start climbing steps, their overtime rate will go up as well. So even though we're looking to cover the same amount of hours, it becomes over the next, several years, it's going to be more costly, to run the overtime. So I had met, Ms. Kazadovic and I, we met with Mr. Hussey and Mr. Kennedy, last year and had an overtime conversation. And
And I would also like to say that the insurance piece of this is changing as well. The market is changing. We met with another provider. We are currently engaged. We have an agreement with the Hartford. It is an annual renewal, but the premiums are kind of going out of sight. And the only way to contain the premium is to consider maybe a less of a reimbursement on the payroll that allows us to manage the premium. And certainly our loss history comes into play when they're giving us a quote. So if that were the case, if we were to enter into an agreement that doesn't provide a weekly payroll benefit or reduces that, it doesn't go back into the account, so we're going to need more money to pay overtime with less of an offset.
through the chair,
Sure.
Ms. Kazanovich, you just reminded me of something. If you recall, we actually, during the budget process, reduced this from 225 to 200. And then after we had that insurance meeting, and we determined that we were most likely going to be switching providers just because of that premium hike, we put the overtime back to 225. But originally, there was a consideration, and this was reduced to 200,000. You just reminded me of that.
My next question is on the call firefighter line item. I recall last year you had an agreement with the call firefighters that you had left to eliminate the call shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And you kept 20,000 for callbacks. How much has been expended out of that 20, Eddie?
Year-to-date, $13,650 roughly, leaving a balance of $6,300.
And how many call firefighters do you have?
So this is why there's such a dramatic decrease from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. Currently I have 4. If you had asked me that 2 weeks ago, I would have told you it was 7. We just lost a call firefighter to an injury. He's not able to return. We lost a call firefighter that just took a full-time position in another community, and then we hired full-time internally one of our call firefighters. So we're down to 4 call firefighters. The budget this year, or for fiscal 20, is built on an assumption that out of those 4 call firefighters, only one of them is an hourly employee. The other 3 are on probation and get their probationary $500 annual stipend in accordance with their collective bargaining agreement. So that's why we were able to reduce the call firefighter line down to this level of 500 because there's only one employee in fiscal '20 that's actually an hourly employee. The rest of them are all stipended.
Okay, but this money is strictly used for them to be called back? For a fire call?
No, it could be used for, it's a payroll line item. So they get paid out of,
Or for training?
yes, so I was just trying to, so there is money for call firefighters in training, and then the call firefighters line, and you'll notice that there's an asterisk. I changed the title of these to try to better reflect what they're serving. So like last year, it just said firefighters and fire suppression, so that I just changed it, career firefighters, call firefighters. Because they're payroll accounts, typically what happens is if they come in for an emergency call, it's out of the call firefighters line. But if I start to run low in training and I have money available in call firefighters, I could pay them for training out of the call firefighter line. So the line supports call firefighters, whether it's for emergency callback or training.
Okay, but that's the only thing.
That's the only thing.
Otherwise, they get paid out of the training line.
Correct. If they come in for their Monday night trainings, they get paid out of the training line. The only time I'll use an alternate line item is typically when we get to the end of a fiscal year, if I'm running tight somewhere. But right out of the gate come July 1, their training comes out of training, their callback comes out of call firefighters.
So have you had that many fire calls this year?
No, well, the difference is that I had more hourly employees. So I'm losing my senior call staff that were making an hourly rate. They're leaving, so the only pool that I have left now are all people on probation. You know what I'm saying? So the people that I've lost over the last year, in this fiscal year, they were senior call firefighters who were making an hourly rate. So whenever they came back, they were getting paid an hourly rate. Whereas if it was a probationary person that came in, they're not getting anything because they're just a stipended employee.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just thought you didn't have, that you only had like, last year when you were here, that there were only like 2 call firefighters.
Yeah, so Ms. Casanova just also raised another issue. My call numbers when I was here last year, it didn't really fluctuate. I think I had 4 last year, and then I hired 4 this past summer. I hired 4 new call firefighters. One of those we just picked up full-time, the other 3 are still there. So currently I have 7. The other thing that's driving that suppression line is, no, there hasn't been completely all that callback. We did have a call firefighter injury that under the collective bargaining agreement, we were required to make payments, and that came out of the fire suppression line. So a good chunk of that spending actually went to 1 employee due to an injury.
Okay. That was, and is that person?
They have since left the department.
So that's part of the reason?
Correct.
Okay.
All set?
Thank you.
Good. Ann?
Yeah, ambulance receipts.
I always come prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, how are they? Are they,
Yep, so I spoke with our billing company yesterday. We closed out fiscal 18 with a little over 1.3 million in ambulance receipts for fiscal 18. To date, year to date in fiscal 19, we're at 964,000. So running that out, we anticipate over the next 5 months that we'll probably land, if not the same, maybe a little higher than the 1.3 that we collected. Our current ambulance appropriation account balance is a little over 2.6 million. So once we close out fiscal 19, we should have about 3 million, a little over 3 million in that account. Now, as you know, a portion of that money goes to offset the operational side of the budget in terms of the firefighter salaries, but the ambulance that you see on the capital for next year, much like we did our last ambulance purchase 3 years ago, we'll be paying cash for that truck right out of the ambulance appropriations, and it won't be a borrowing.
Is the level of collections what it was last year?
It's actually a little higher.
Okay. My other question is about revenue. When the fire inspectors go out and do their inspections, where does that, they're charging people, where does that money come, where does it go into? General fund?
General fund.
Are there any other revenue sources besides the inspections, the ambulance account, the tower money, although it's not really revenue?
The only other revenue account that I can think of that's very small dollars is when we write a citation. If we collect money on that, that goes into the general fund as well. Those would be the only other revenue sources.
Okay. Thank you.
What about the, occasionally hear about some nice donations through the Board of Selectmen meeting to the fire
So
department?
those go into a donations account, and we typically use that account to support some type of a community project. We fund our community CPR program out of the donations account. So the money that comes in from donations, we reinvest back into the community in some way, in some type of a project or an effort.
See, Kev, how complicated all these accounts get? I mean, you know, that sounded pretty straightforward.
Much clearer picture.
Ed?
Chief, you do a nice job on the social media, so I tend to watch that. On the out-of-town mutual calls, do you find that's pushing up your call volume? And then how does that work in terms of, do we get reimbursed when we have a crew out there? And
So no, there's no reimbursement. Under the statewide mutual aid program, we essentially can go anywhere in the state to assist, much like they can come here to assist. There's no fire department in the world, ours included, that couldn't survive today without mutual aid. But it's for the most part an even exchange. We run the numbers every year. We responded out of town I think close to 150 times, and that includes our special teams like dive team, tech rescue. It's sort of all-encompassing. It includes fire, it includes ambulance. So in the grand scheme of things, in a little over 3,700 calls, really only about 150 of those are mutual aid. And then we received 125 mutual aid requests into the town of Auburn. So it's for the most part, it's a pretty even split. But there is no cost to that when we come out of town, much like when Worcester or Oxford or Milford, when anybody comes in for mutual aid, there's no invoice or bill that we get for that.
Okay. As a follow-up, calls to the Mass Pike, is that part of the number?
So I'm going to be filing legislation to try to move the Mass Pike
South?
out of, make it a north-south situation out of town.
Yes.
It's,
We don't need
as
to
Mr.
talk
Kennedy
about
will tell you, it's a hotbed of activity.
Absolutely. No, it's scary, no doubt about it. I only have one question, just a quick numbers question for the career firefighters line. That's an increase. I had that about $93,000. How much is the half-year new firefighter number of that 93,000? I assume that's where it is.
I think that's the
Approximately?
Because my original request was for 2 positions with a July start. So I believe that, I believe that 90,000 is the half year. Did you include? No, because you wouldn't have included.
I did get those numbers. I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, I would say there's got to be some step increases in there.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I'm
no, that's
sorry.
fine.
So there are steps.
Wait for it.
Do you have?
I want to say that the base pay was like 56, so it's about half of that.
Half of that, okay.
Yeah,
I was
26.
just curious.
Yeah.
Approximately
About 27, I think it was $27,000 to $28,000.
So ironically, technically, we may get actually 3/4 of that 27 back
Hopefully.
through the SAFER grant program. That'd be awkward. General fund, chief, you get screwed. It's going to go into general fund. Any other questions? Is it on revenue?
It is.
All right, go ahead.
Couple quick questions. License and certifications, what does that entail, Chief?
Sure, just give me
I
one.
see we've gone up from fiscal 16 to approximately 20,000. Now we're
Yep. Just
Double
give
that
me one
number.
second just to get to the page.
Is that for the new person?
No. So license and certifications encompasses everything from our ambulance licensure, controlled substance, our CMED dues. So I don't know if you're familiar with CMED. The CMED dues went up this year by about close to $1,000. So we had a little increase in the CMED dues. Emergency reporting, which is our fire and inspection software report, that went up slightly. AmbiPro, which is our ambulance reporting software, we had to buy a module in order to allow us to send some different things to the hospitals electronically, so that went up a little bit. That was pretty much the excuse me. It went down. I'm trying to think of why it went down, though. Oh, I eliminated a dispatch module off of TriTech. So it went from 39,683 to 37,800.
Okay, so some of those certifications are really more software applications than they are, and licensures for software
No,
applications?
so $10,000 of this, actually more than that, $13,000 of this is payment to our EMTs and paramedics for their continuing education and EMT research.
Okay.
I'm confused. It sounded like you had a lot of, like, software licensing in
Yep.
there. Is that the appropriate place for, it seems like mixing licenses for employees with software?
I guess,
or-
I hear what you're saying. I guess in future, if the committee wanted to, we could certainly, in future years, pull out the EMT. Everything with the exception of the EMT recertification and EMT Con Ed is all ambulance licensure or software licenses. So if we wanted to pull those two EMT things out and put them in the professional development line item or something like that, we could certainly do that.
That seems less, it seems more logical to, because it's like mixing two different kinds of fruit in the same.
Yeah, is that something that can be done in the future, Ed? Do we?
Yeah, I think we can carve that out and put a new line item called software licenses, or...
Is that how where do you must have software.
So we have a line item under MIS called hardware software, and it's all grouped into there. We don't separate those licenses out.
Hardware, software.
Yeah. So we can do.
Could use the same line item name, same number.
Yeah.
Account number.
Yeah, I mean, if in the future we can set up a new line item and pull that out.
That clarifies that as far as the certifications. New equipment, can you just touch upon quickly what new equipment is going to be purchased for the 30,000?
So the new equipment line, typically we don't identify, other than some normal replacement of hose or nozzles. The new equipment line is essentially anything that breaks over the course of a year, like if I lose a chainsaw or if I lose a vent saw or something like that, it would come out of that new equipment line. So we don't come into the fiscal year saying this is the new piece of equipment we're going to buy. It really is, it's used more of as a replacement line for aging equipment that we identify or something that breaks.
And can you, or the CFO, just simplify, I think I had a better grasp. I was going to ask about ambulance receipts, but can you just explain, for people at home that are hearing different positions and increased calls to Reliant and, CIP stuff, exactly what the ambulance receipts, that this number that they're seeing here is offset? And how do you come to your offsets to determine how much will come out of ambulance receipts towards this operating budget and what will be left aside to purchase, new ambulances as part of the CIP? Can you just give a quick
Yeah, so what we do is under the, and Ann was part of this, when the ambulance service was taken over by the town, and it was in-house, we had a business plan, and the business plan provided cost recovery for 12 personnel. It originally was 10, and then it was bumped up to 12, and then we came back to 10 again. But it captures those 10 individuals' salaries plus indirect costs, okay? So we use an indirect cost of about 30%, which includes insurance, retirement, Medicare. And that fluctuates all depending on what plan. We don't drill down and get precise. We use a percentage. We use 30%, which is a standard for all of those costs. In addition to that, any supplies that are needed that the ambulance carries, which is part of this budget, is part of that calculation as well. So I think...
And the medical director. So essentially anything in the budget that supports EMS comes from the ambulance receipts. So the $30,000, well, it's the $34,850 ambulance receipts, $4,000 for the medical ambulance receipts. So anything that supports the EMS operation is an offset to the ambulance receipts.
And so that offset for FY20 is $875,000. And in addition to that, if there are any capital expenditures that are used to support the ambulance, whether it's a direct payment for an ambulance, a lease purchase, and I don't believe there are any...
No, there is not, because with the last ambulance, we paid for it directly out of ambulance receipts.
Right.
So we have nothing on the...
So right now, there's nothing scheduled for 2020, although in the outward years, you'll see there are some ambulance replacement costs. Those costs are captured as well.
Can you explain why you said we were at 10, we went to 12, and we went back to 10. Can we explain why we did that? And we're adding new personnel and trying to get up to the group's larger? Is there a chance to go back to a 12 or another number to put more ambulance receipts towards personnel?
In terms of the staffing level, I know, and we've had this discussion, 12 does not support what the fire department is currently carrying. So, how many individuals are...
It went to 12 in 09, 10 when the economy was rough. In an effort to save some money on the tax, we taxed the ambulance receipts a little bit, but we pulled back to 10 because it was only a couple of years that we realized that we were stretching the ambulance receipts a little thinner than we really wanted to, or what we felt we could support in the future.
As a matter of fact, there was one year where the general fund had to subsidize a portion of, and we had this discussion because the ambulance receipts were running thin. So, and now it's all coming back, but we reverted back to 10 because we wanted to build up the reserve for ambulance, so we wouldn't put that town in the position. Take out that volatility. I think that was the year that the Medicaid rate changed.
Yeah, and it was also that year where Blue Cross was paying providers directly versus the ambulance until we won that fight in a legal battle. So there was a few things going on that affected the receipts that year. 10's a comfortable number because if we want to do all of these other things like medical supplies and the medical director, and especially really the heavy capital like the ambulances, the stretchers, you can only stretch it so thin on one side before you're just ultimately going to have to pay for it on another. So 10 was what the business plan called for back in 2005. And the business plan back actually in 2005 also called for the capital to be used. But because we were spending essentially every nickel that came in on ambulance receipts, we were using as a direct offset to the budget, we went a decade without ever really working the plan the way that it was supposed to. So 3 years ago when we purchased that ambulance, that was the first time that we actually exercised the business plan the way that it was written, because we were able to not take what we need for the 10 and let some reserves build up on an annual basis so we have the money to put down on a new ambulance. We have the money, So 10's the magic number. If we tried to tax it more than that, we're just going to have to pay for it somewhere else on another, in another end on the capital side.
The new stretchers we purchased, did those come out of ambulance?
Those came out of ambulance receipts as well. Anything, even the ballistic protection, the ballistic vest, because even though there are some on fire trucks, but the ballistic protection, anything that has an EMS correlation, I'm not doing it this May. I'm going to wait until next year, but I'm going to be upgrading our stair chairs to a power lift stair chair. I'm going to be including that in the price. I'll be doing a separate warrant article on town meeting. That will come out of ambulance receipts. So anything that has an EMS tie comes directly out of ambulance receipts.
Thank you.
And just one last reminder, and I think I say it every year, the reason why we went to the in-house ambulance was all about service. We were unhappy with response times to the residents, and we said, all right, enough. So the fact that we're covering all those expenses, good business plan. Yeah, maybe it took a few extra years to cover the ambulances, but it was all about service first, which is what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, the request is for the 2020 budget, $3,179,326. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Good luck with that safer grant.
Thank you. In a sign of solidarity, I will sit to Lieutenant Harris.
It's going to wake her up. All right. All right. Thanks, Chief. So our next budget is the police budget. We're going to start with the CIP. Lieutenant Harrigan is here, our budget expert for multiple years. Good to see you. And thanks for your patience. As Kevin said, that fire department budget is very complicated. It's complex. So.
See that.
All right. Regarding the CIP, I didn't see any changes in the current year. It looks like we're adding 4 cars for the lease purchase.
Correct.
Four cars?
Yeah.
Okay.
2020 would be one of the years we get 4. Other years we do 3.
Okay, good. Some additional, I guess it would be replacement body armor, is that our additional out in 2024? Am I looking at the right line?
42,000, yes, for body armor. Yep.
It's replacement though, right?
It's a replacement, yes.
That's fine. And that's really about it, unless anyone has any other questions on this for our 2024. I did notice there's a lot of items that you included in here that are, you're looking for grants and that kind of stuff that are not as part of the CIP. I appreciate you putting that in there. As those things roll, if we don't get grants, do they get onto the town manager's wish list for some of that stuff, I hope?
That's our hope.
Yeah, that's why we put them on the radar screen.
Okay, so just, there's more stuff that you could want, and hopefully we're going to get grant money to cover a lot of that. Okay. Any other questions or any other comments on, a lot of detail on there, thank you. We definitely do appreciate that.
I have one question.
Okay, Mallory?
About the radios. Now, maybe it's a good thing Chief Coleman stayed. Does the fire department have the same radios? Or will they be upgraded? Because it's the same dispatch, right? But it's different radios.
I'm sorry, we talking about the dispatch consoles? Or?
If you're talking about the dispatch consoles, I believe ours are similar.
As far as the dispatch radios, the fire and police radios, it's a separate radio system, but they're all there. I have new portable radios in my CIP for this year. That's on a different bandwidth. But,
Okay.
Police and fire have separate frequencies, separate radio systems.
The console,
The console is...
that cost is split between the two departments, or is it all here?
Yeah, it's the $250,000 for the radio replacement will replace the police radios and the fire radios in the communication center. So the entire center is getting an upgrade with new radios both on the police and fire.
But our portable and mobile radios will not be the same. I don't know if you're going to get a newer model than what we...
I'm not getting that.
Not getting any of that.
The radio project, that has nothing to do with that, strictly a dispatch.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Just quickly, while you brought that up, I know Lieutenant Lemon had come in at one point and gave a presentation on radios and bandwidths and changes in bandwidths and FCC moving, I forget which of you was moving out of that. They were going to bump you out of that bandwidth. Can you just refresh my memory?
Well, we
on what that
do
was?
now have all our new portable radios. They just came online approximately 3 weeks ago, and all the cruiser mobile radios. So now we have 2 in our cars that have LPS7 on them now, so we're able to monitor surrounding community. Like, there are a lot of channels. I think everyone in the state now that we're able to monitor. The only piece I think that is still missing from this whole radio upgrade is the permission from the state to use the infrastructure. So we're currently waiting from, I think, permission from the undersecretary in order to do that. But all the hardware equipment that was in the capital for mobiles and portables, we now have online as of 3 weeks ago. So.
Great.
Thanks, Kev. Was there talk on some number on that infrastructure, or was it we didn't want to know it at this point because it was ridiculous?
I think it was, we didn't want to know it, but I want to say it was pegged at somewhere near $500,000. That's my recollection.
That's what I had in my head. Has that number moved, changed, got...
I haven't heard it coming down at all, so.
It's too bad. I didn't ask that. All right, so we'll keep our head in the sand on that for the moment, I guess. Okay, that's it for the CIP? Great. Very uneventful. Good job on that. Now, okay, the operating budget. Once again, I'll run through I'll call the subtotals on it. The first subtotal, which would include chief and dispatch, $822,954, and that's basically flat funded on last year. A couple of minor changes, increases and decreases on a few accounts. The subtotal police admin, I'll jump right to that, $887,240, and that is a $5,500 increase over 2019, and mostly that's in technology support. Regarding the patrolmen, lieutenants, sergeants, et cetera, that subtotal of $3,525,258, which is about $15,000 up from prior year. A couple of shifts in the patrolman and the patrolman Quinn bill accounts. I don't know if you had any comments on that, Lieutenant. It looked like almost a pocket shift, which seemed unusual.
Well, I think we've had some recent retirements that now new hires don't get the Quinn, so that's why you see a reduction in the Quinn line item. Now we're in 2020, we'll be fully funded for 30 patrol positions.
Yep.
So now those salaries are covered for the entire year. Unfortunately, however, it looks like they're going to be vacant until at least the academy opens in sometime after January 1st in Boylston. We're hoping there'll be a civil service exam given in April, and depending on when that's certified, looks like we're going to be going off the list again to fill our current vacancy. So it's all dependent on the academies and when it becomes available, unfortunately, right now.
Okay. And the crime prevention subtotal at $3,711,729. That's about $19,000 up from prior year. The police total, and then I'll open up for questions, requested budget, which is in agreement with the town manager, is $4,598,969, almost $25,000 increase, or just over 0.5%. I'll open it up to, you know what, before I do that, I usually ask for a few comments. I know Chief Coleman has a lot of comments, so I didn't ask him, but I'm asking you, so. Any comments on the budget?
No, not for this particular one. You'll see that we've asked for, I think, kind of some modest increases in some of those, I hate to mention it based on the prior conversation about buildings and grounds, but again, we're in the same boat. We've just zeroed out our building and ground line item this week with a bill that came due, so we'll be coming soon, maybe as soon as next week, to do a transfer into that account, because we know we're going to generate some type of bill once the chiller comes on for our AC this season. So, that we've actually asked for a $2,000 increase as a way to try and bump that up to what's realistically we need. We've been doing transfers in the thousands of dollars into those accounts the last 3 fiscal years, I believe it was, definitely 17 and 18, and now 19. We'll be looking at doing another transfer there. And again, most of that's driven by our HVAC system.
Right.
Plumbing has just a few minor glitches here and there with that, and the HVAC system is really the nemesis, I think. Technology, we've also asked for an increase in that line item, and basically we're looking to have a couple of different initiatives that been kind of on the back burner, but we really need to get moving on it, and one of those we'd like to upgrade our Wi-Fi in the building. We need some, I'm no expert, but signal extenders and whatnot, and I think that's not going to run a whole lot of money, but it will really change things for us in the department, make things easier on a day-to-day basis. And we also have to start considering our backup and off-site storage of data, because we've already experienced 2 building floods to date. If anything happens in our server room, we have no way to get that data back. So those 2 initiatives, the Wi-Fi and the backup of data, is why we requested a increase in our technology. And I don't know if other towns or departments are experiencing it, but it seems like every year it's about a 4% increase in software support fees, or, this is no longer supported. So we're starting to see some of that with some of our technologies in the building, that they're just outdated, not supported, and we're going to lose that.
Okay. Good. I'll open up to questions. Kim?
Eddie, does it make sense to increase the building repair line item here, similarly to what you did with fire?
Yeah, let me just take a look at the 3-year history. Yeah, 3-year history is at 21. The previous fiscal year was at 29, so certainly the history will show you that there is a greater need than what has been recommended, although the request was
If we were to increase it?
we actually increased it by $2,000 over what was requested.
Right, but if
Now,
we increased it up
so
to
we're
like
cheap.
25,000, would that put a big hole in anything for you?
So right now, we're $8,000 shy of taxing to 2.5. Certainly, I would say, as we always say this time of year, it's our intention to try to whittle that down as best we can leading into the fall town meeting. I think history will show you, I think last year we came in with a budget taxing at roughly 1.8 out of 2.5, and we actually settled at about 0.74. So we managed to get that down by over 1%. It's too early to know what's going to happen at the state level. I can tell you that I am concerned. I read in today's paper that the House is now taking up the governor's budget. the year-to-date revenue projections are down $403 million over what they projected. So if you extrapolate...
Is that including the February number, which I just heard?
The February number hasn't come out yet, so that was through December, $403 million. So if that trend continues, you look at upwards of a revenue shortfall at the state of about $1 billion. Hopefully things will turn around. I mean, things have been good up until recently, but I think there's a fear that the economy is slowing down, and we're going to see the effects of that not only at the local level but at the state level as well. What that's going to do for the budget, I don't know. So I'd like to say I would love to increase that, quite honestly, but I would suggest that maybe we do that when we get some additional information and make an adjustment at the fall town meeting.
Kevin?
Just a second, I mean, I think that only makes sense to put more money in that account right now. I understand we're close to that bigger plan, but we look and we know the history of that building. It's just,
well, I got to tell you,
flip a light switch in that building, something.
I have comfort in the fact that those positions that Lieutenant told you were not going to be filled would provide additional money that we couldn't put in there, so I think we can manage it with what we have now. I don't expect these positions, although funded in the 2020 budget, to be funded on July 1, so that's going to leave some flexibility within the departmental budget to address a need. But in the long term, I do agree that we're going to have to bump that up, given the fact that at some point these positions are going to be filled, and it's not going to provide that flexibility in future years. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to lay the groundwork now, knowing that right now we're sitting on this current fiscal year 19, about $160,000 in our salary account for patrolmen. So, because of our open position, so we know we have that. So we're not as nervous about our building and grounds and what may come in. So there's money to transfer to take care of that this year, but that's not always going to be the case. And depending on when that academy starts, we may not have the luxury to do an intradepartmental transfer to address some of these needs.
I would rather use the exercise of the budget process to get a correct number on this. And if we need to make an adjustment or can make an adjustment in the fall town meeting just to unilaterally bring down the patrolman salary because of delayed start times, then we just address that and then we have a better number there. I'm not a big fan of moving salary monies into other expense monies, especially when we're making the budget now. So I'm supportive of making an increase to this account now. Regardless, Ed said we got about $8,000. I'd rather correct it now, not forget it later, and then if we can bring the police budget down only because we don't have bodies coming in right away, then we just address that and make that budget even better.
And I think we're early enough in the process with the,
Yeah.
you know, we're in the early stage that we'll find other places that money may be trimmed through other departments as they come forward. This is a known.
To up that line item to
25, was that the number you wanted, Kim?
25,000.
So an increase of $8,000, all right. So let's see if there's any other comments on that, and then we'll make an adjusted budget request on that.
I guess I would probably go just a little bit lower so we have a little bit of flexibility in that number, even the 3-year average. We did a 22, which would put us, what, above, that'd be 5,000 above the requested amount, which would leave us 3,000 to...
Okay, so when we get to that...
That's fine.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Trevor, question?
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of, we're in our second budget I know there were a couple small ones that we did last week, but we've got a lot to get through here, and with an $8,000 cap that we don't really know where that's going to go, and we're saying it could change. Historically it changes, but we don't know, and we already know there's flexibility in that budget. I know we're saying we don't like to move money from these funds, but sometimes you need to, and it seems a little premature to make a change this early in the game to go into an $8,000 pool on a, we have $8,000 in excess on a $69 million budget, and we're going to put it in a place where we know that that department already has some funds that they can play around with. To quote, Bill Belichick, the cap can be moved in a number of different ways, and it seems a little, it seems just, you guys know the money's there. It's not that we're unsupportive of putting money there when it needs to be there. I think we've shown that, we're willing to do, it just seems like a...
From a devil's advocate perspective, why don't we move 5,000 from the patrolman account, or whatever account you think is going to be delayed start, move it over to, we're fairly certain they're going to need a better budget, and do it right now, if that's how we want to approach it.
If you want a more transparent budget where you're saying, oh, we know we're going to move $7,000 from some sort of salary account to this account, then move it there. But I think to start adding money in when we already know that we're up against a shortfall seems like just a premature move. I don't know how you guys feel about that. But
I think that's a good statement. I would agree with that, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that when these positions are filled, it is going to put a squeeze on those resources that they tend to draw from. So at some point, we're going to have to make a correction to that line item and get it more in line with the 3-year history, because we know those expenditures are there. They're supported by the level of expenses in the prior 3 years. That's why I suggested maybe we wait till the fall town meeting to make an adjustment, either through a correction within the budget, or we go through, utilize some additional revenue source that may not be expected right now.
Go ahead.
Is the building assessment inclusive of the police department building as well?
Yes.
So that makes more sense to me then, to wait for that assessment, right? Which should have some recommendations to amend that town fall budget. That would be my preference. Because I agree, you don't want to shock town meeting members when all of a sudden your full staff budget goes up next year, right?
I guess just in this vein, I'm a bit confused. We had fire before us, and we went up 7,000 in their building maintenance account. If we're that tight with 8, should we have held them off until the fall to bring their number up to a number which they're probably going to need the 7, just like they're going to need the 5?
Well, I got to tell you, we did recognize the need. That's why we recommended more than what was suggested by the department. I think they knew that 15 was light, but I think they also knew that they were sitting on a surplus and they were able to do a transfer from within the budget. But I think we have to, I see both sides of it, quite honestly. It's not truly reflecting the cost of repairs, building maintenance repairs to the department. At some point, we have to bring that in line.
And we're not making an educated guess right now as to what that's going to be. And so just to shuffle some funds to make it look like we have more money in the account without that assessment concerns me, because we could be wildly off.
What assessment?
Right? The building assessment.
That's going to not have any impact on that.
A potential repair.
Are you talking different? We're not talking building
right.
The long-term assessment. We're talking the
Long-term. But for next year's budget, I would doubt, I would assume that any recommendations that come out of that are going to be capital corrections to that facility if we keep it. Yeah, I'd just say from a pure budgeting perspective, you budget to what your trend is showing you and what you know your expenses are going to be, and get to the right number now, then we don't have to think about it later. It's still going to be there, whether we make a transfer in the fall, whether we make a transfer in the spring. We are still going to have to be something close to $20,000+ for that account.
And otherwise, we put them in the same position that the chief is, that if there's an emergency, they're going to overexpend their line item.
Yeah.
Be up here for an hour and a half.
Well, as the lieutenant had stated, she has to come back to you in the next week or two and ask for a transfer because they've already depleted the account.
Right, but she hasn't expended above her.
She has, I looked at it, it's not in a deficit balance. I think there's $500 left, so I think there's recognition that at some point, there's going to be a need greater than what's available, and she's trying to meet that, anticipate that additional cost.
And by the way, we're still trying to provide the best budget we can, even on a detailed basis for May town meeting. Yes, it will get revised, corrected, and it'll look a lot better come the fall, but this is our chance as part of an official process to get the May budget as correct detail as possible. So it's the board's pleasure on how we want to address this. It's not a big deal either way. We know we're going to be fine. It's more a matter of just how we manage the process of a good budget. Any other questions or comments on any other line items?
So I had a motion for
Yep,
22.
and we're not going to lose that. We will definitely deal with that. I just want to make sure if we're covering any other questions on any other line items.
Just a couple quick questions. Yeah, you mentioned Quinn, Bill. New hires are not eligible for Quinn, or they have
They're
not? They're not eligible based on the
Except for
law, based
lateral.
on...
A lateral would
If they
be-
get it.
If we got somebody that came, that was currently getting the Quinn benefit from another community, we pay them whatever they were getting in that other community here. So any new hire off the list, there's no Quinn.
But under the Quinn law, the Quinn as it existed, the educational incentive as was established by the Quinn law, that's, for new hires is no longer in existence.
Correct.
Just a couple line items, questions on the training amount you requested. 4,167. Looked like you had a high in 18 of 10,000. Can you just kind of give us an idea of the average was a little even higher than that, and probably because of that 10,000 a year?
You talking about meetings and education, the increase there? Is that?
No,
Which,
5315, the
Oh, okay.
pure training.
I found you. There was, and I'm not, why am I not showing the same 3-year? 10,000.
722.
I'm not showing that on mine. Mine says 3,500 across the board.
Wow.
Yeah.
18 looked like there was a spike there.
That was probably, I'm guessing, that was, we transferred money in there knowing the kids were going, I call them the kids going to the academy. So there was money put into the training line item to offset some of their costs, so. Can I use your copy since yours seems to be?
That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird, mine doesn't reflect that. And we, so then, I'm showing that.
What is she looking at?
Training.
Oh,
Yeah, I had trouble finding it.
Yeah, I think that was related to the 2 candidates that we sent to the academy. And then knowing that there was going to be some additional training needs for the new hires, because prior to that, that line item specifically paid for the SWAT teams in-service training when they went to New Jersey.
Okay.
Now we don't have to pay for that. They got some grant money, so we typically pay for all our ammunition costs relative to training out of that. So knowing that, I forget what the allowance was for the academy for their rounds per student officer they needed, that money was put in there to address their ammunition needs for training.
And you brought up the fee for the academies, potential new hires, where would that land in your...
We'd have to do a transfer because we don't know, I guess it's going to cost $3,000. I haven't heard there's going to be any change for any student that we put through the municipal academy. I think we're still open to the idea that if a couple of laterals came knocking on the door and that worked out, that we'd hire a lateral at this point. So we're not really sure, we haven't committed to anything, and not knowing really the status of the academy, when the civil service list is going to be established, we would be looking to do a transfer from the patrolman salary account, knowing those positions were funded, not filled, to offset any of those costs whenever they occur, because we really don't know when that's going to happen.
Okay. And you mentioned the meetings and meetings/ed
Yeah.
account. There's a pretty sizable increase there. What is that line? And
Well, knowing that there's going to be some turnover in the department within the next 3 to 5 years, there could be as many as 5 of the 9 command staff members retiring within that time. We're looking to offer specialized training, so that's what this account covers. So typically, we used to have a lot of free training, but now there's a cost associated with any specialized training you want to do. And obviously, it's important to train our people. So we're looking to pay, because quite honestly, we've overexpended this account for several years, but we've used law enforcement trust money to send people away to training because we recognize the importance of training our people. But now I think we need to start truly getting back to some of the earlier discussion, what our true needs are to train our people, and $8,000 for a 40-person department just doesn't make it. So we're really trying to get into a program, and it's not just going to be for the patrol guys, it's command level training too, leadership training for all our guys, and they cost anywhere from $695 a training and above, especially if you have to travel out of state. So this is another way to start truly funding what we need, what we think our true need is for our people moving forward. Like I said, we have 3 brand new people that just joined on the department, will be on their own within the next month, and that are going to need training going forward. And anything from our SROs to our TASER, defensive tactics instructors, the motorcycle units, all require annual training, certifications to maintain their certification, and there's a cost associated with that. So we're looking to start funding that more realistically.
okay, we mentioned a couple of how some of these are labeled, and just looking going forward, some of those things you just mentioned seem to me they're clearly professional development, whereas that's a very low-funded one. Training, is that recruit training? Is that in-service training? It just seems that some of these are not labeled or monies. I understand you can move them as needed, but when you look at this from afar, it's not really clear what the...
Right, because professional development, you'd think that would be a training thing. That pays for food for vendors that come in and use our facility to train. It doesn't, but it's one of those...
But yet we have a food line item, above.
Yeah, and the food line item is for our guys when they do go to training. There's a contractual benefit for them for meal allowances, so that comes out of the food account, and that's why there was a slight increase in that as well, because when we do start sending people to more training, there's going to be a cost associated with meals and whatnot. And additionally, the detainee meals come out of that line item.
Okay.
And there's been a significant increase there. We will be doing, or coming in and asking for transfer because we've almost depleted that account with our unhappy meals. And it seems like people are staying longer, and we're having more prisoners that are there days at a time. So there's been an increase there as well. So we have about $280 remaining there for the rest.
The regional lockup should be coming online in the next year,
Oh.
so that will be decreased.
Well,
most of that.
maybe, depending on our training and what we have going on with that, so we'll see.
I'm sorry, I just have a few. So, communication director is the only one that doesn't list a bargaining group. Is that a contract position, or is that are they in a, are they?
Bylaw,
Bylaw.
non-union.
Okay,
Yeah.
just it didn't have anything next to it. SEMLEC fees, where do those get listed in here? How's
They're
that?
out of our dues. It comes out of the dues line item. Yep.
Right at the bottom,
Right at the
last one.
bottom.
First page.
5732?
Okay. I've got
On
it.
page 1.
Okay.
All set? This visual of prisoners in a flooded cell just came up to my head. It's a little awkward. Cold night.
And that's the, I don't know if, it's probably worth mentioning also that our contract expires at the end of this fiscal year, so this doesn't account for any increases that may come. So there may be some adjustments that are going to need to be made down the road.
And that's provided for, some of the money's been provided for in the reserve account?
Right,
Yep.
right.
Did we discuss it at the last meeting?
Right, okay. Any other questions? I know Kim/Kevin are proposing an increase of $5,000 to $22,000 in the, that would be the building ground repair account. So that would make, well, let's vote on that first, and then we can play with the big numbers here anyway. So there's a motion to add 5,000 to that with a second. Any final discussion on that? All in favor of increasing that by 5,000? Aye. Opposed? So,
Abstain.
abstains? Yeah, it passes. Okay, so that gives
What was
us
that, 22,000?
Yeah.
up to 22, so add 5,000 to that.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And by the way, great discussion on that. We don't have that often in terms of your budgeting our process, and there's some great points. Therefore, the total adjusted police department budget, $4,603,989. If I'm doing my math right, that's a $29,812 increase, or 0.65% over fiscal 19. Do I have a motion on that?
So, second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. All right, that's great. Lieutenant, thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to be seen, thank you.
So we'll be expecting a couple of transfers coming from you in the
It's
next,
looking that way.
okay.
And they'll, I
Part of the
believe we'll also be looking for a transfer for an assessment center. I don't know that the chief had mentioned that he wants to do that, to establish a list for sergeant. And he's looking to do that in the next couple of weeks,
Okay.
depending on the timetable established by civil service. So we'll probably be bringing that in as well.
Okay, work that through the CFO, and we'll add it to the list of transfers and stuff to do. Great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Let's see, we've got one transfer, and then we'll talk a little bit about the debt management policy. And the transfer, this is from the reserve account under town manager, and this is to the salary account for the town manager. Amount requested $2,350.26. Ed?
So there are two transfers we typically bring in during the course of the year. One is to meet her contractual obligation, which her contract runs from January 31st, so it splits the fiscal year. So this meets the obligation from January 31st to June 30th, and then in April, contingent upon evaluation, there'll be a consideration or a sum of money that will come into you at that point in time.
Okay. Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. So I had a couple discussions with Ed regarding the debt management policy and a modification that I would like to make on it. And it kind of turned into a dilemma because I think what I'm requesting to modify is actually related to the existing policy. which is our CIP set aside. So I don't know how we want to deal with this. I mean, are we generally in favor, or do we have any comments on the proposed long-term debt policy?
I think we should handle this in such a way, I would like to, and certainly we can talk about your suggested revision to this policy. And I have no objection to that revision. But it relates to a current existing financial policy where we do a set-aside of 1/10 of 2.5 that it directly gets earmarked to our CIP, 5-year CIP plan. To date, since we started, we're applying about $1.1 million of tax levy money to our annual CIP. That grows by about $100,000 a year. I think the chairman's suggested amendment to this policy would cap that, so we would continue to raise $100,000 a year to go towards our CIP till we hit the $2 million mark, at which point the 1/10 would no longer go into our CIP plan. So we would have to note that on here, make this part of the policy, and then come back to you at a later date with our original financial policy and amend that earmark of 1/10 and note that in there as well, once we hit the $2 million mark.
Both places is how you might want to address
Yeah.
it. All right. So the numbers I came up with, and Eddie looked at them, it's somewhere between 2028 and 2029, the way we're adding each year to our CIP. I'll call it a set-aside, whatever. We'll get to $2 million in annual, really, revenues raised for this in 2028 or 2029. At that point in time, and I think Eddie sort of agreed, $2 million to cover our annual CIP is a pretty good amount of money. I don't know if that's a correct amount, whether $2.5 million is a better amount or not, but as taxpayers, we should all be concerned at some point in time. Let's put enough in that bucket and maybe cap it there. So that means $2 million will be added every year. And instead of increasing by 1%, we use $100,000 that gets put into a CIP trust, which has $1.4 million in it. And it's been sitting there for a while for other uses. It actually will bring down our tax increase going forward because we'll be adding in a dollar amount, not an increase that's already. It would estimate in 2028 to be over $120,000, just because we're adding 1/4% on a higher base amount, which is our levy still increases every year. And if we assume it goes up 2.5% every year, by 2028, that $110,000 now is going to be over $124,000 every year added. So in this way, we'll actually be cutting the tax increase.
Yeah, I think if you just put a cap on it of $2 million, whenever we get there, we get there. And quite honestly, if one year we don't need $2 million, then we don't put the 1/10 earmark into the CIP, because we're using that every year to fund the capital and the capital only.
But we're spending $2 million plus every year in the CIP. And that's not counting debt exclusions and all this other stuff. We actually are still spending, in fact, $1.1 million is going in now, and we've got to raise another $800,000, if I looked at that correctly, for 2020, right?
So for 2020, because I have to subtract out the other revenue sources, we're using tax levy of 1.1, and we have bond proceeds of 842. So the sum of those two, outside of our other revenue sources, is funding our capital program. So that's roughly $2 million.
Yeah.
So I think $2 million roughly, once we get to that point, we'll be able to handle all of our capital needs without borrowing, without an authorization to borrow money. And that was our goal to begin with.
Correct.
So that way, by not borrowing money, we're saving the taxpayers debt and interest costs that doesn't have to be absorbed through the operational side of the budget, because we're covering it through tax levy.
And obviously, 8-10 years from now, someone else that won't be me can come up with another dumb idea to make it look better. I don't know.
Now,
So-
just if I may, just to put that into perspective, before we started this plan, we would borrow $2 million a year, and that cost would be in year one, for a 10-year purpose, the level debt service would be $200,000 in debt payment, and close in year one, probably about $150,000 of interest. So we're saving the taxpayers $350,000.
We're in a much better financial place, obviously. Hey, we're paying for it, though. It's our taxes have all gone up in the last 20 years, quite a bit, no doubt about it. So if there aren't any other questions, the request, I guess, is to support this with
The cap.
the cap and with a subsequent annual $100,000 going to CIP trust every year. So that's a slight modification to the original proposal that Ed had made. Just didn't have that language. Then we would have to come back at some point in time and take a vote to modify the existing,
Just to put that same footnote in, that once we hit the $2 million mark, then
yeah.
So do you want some sort of a motion? Or are you just
Yeah, actually,
for a consensus?
actually, no, I think let's do it in the form of a motion. Therefore, we're clear to the Board of Selectmen on what we want to do on this. All right, so
All right, so whatever you said, I'll move it.
I thought so. Any other questions
I
on
think you
that?
should do two motions. One, to amend it to include the cap.
All right, so, Kim, that motion would be to amend the proposed debt management policy as recommended by the CFO to put in a cap of $2 million. And subsequent to that, $100,000 annually goes to the CIP trust. That would be one motion, right? Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Kim made the motion, we have a second on that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, so voted. The second motion, seeing how Kim is volunteering, would be that basically at a future date we consider, or you want to, do you
I
think we
think the
do that right
second
now?
motion would be a vote to recommend to the Board of Selectmen as voted, as amended.
As amended.
I recommend that,
Yeah.
I move that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen.
Sharon will make it look so good.
Debt management policy as amended.
As amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted.
Very good.
That should
Thank you.
cover it for
Yep.
now, right? That'd be great. All right, let's finish this up. Takes care of that. There are no minutes. Anyone have any recommendations on budgets for next week? I'm tempted to bring in the DPW at least.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good.
Any others?
I'm going to be away the following week,
Yeah.
so I'd like to be here for DPW. If
Any other ones that you'd like?
not, police and fire, which we
Were the
did tonight.
ones, okay.
And when is the school coming?
I just was going to inform the board, the committee, that the school, I asked if Mary Ellen had a preference, and she said the 27th would be great, because they have a couple of meetings. So I said, I'll float that tonight and see if that is agreeable with.
So DPW, and we'll add a couple of smaller ones. What else? DDIS.
I did Darlene had a matter in court today. I did email her. I have not heard back. But Bill is pretty flexible.
But Darlene has a pretty convoluted budget, too. There's a lot there. I don't know if I want to do them on the same night. I don't want to keep anyone here this late for the rest of the budget season. This is ridiculous.
So who's on for next week?
DPW.
DPW,
Should we bring the library and/or council on aging?
everyone okay with that?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, we'll fill in 2 or 3 on there and get them in next week and see where we stand. Okay, we good on that, Sharon?
Yeah, so you want DPW?
At least, and then we'll, yeah, absolutely. We'll see who's available and get them in. Okay, sound good? All right.
Send you an email. I'll send you an email when I schedule.
Great, okay, that's fine. Anything else? I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you, good night.
Who decided to put police and fire?